This is what we know so far, that this massive air bombardment is probably the biggest of the war so far. And what we think that means is that it's providing cover for a ground incursion on a larger scale than we've seen in the past. Expanding ground operations is what the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force spokesman, said. Now, in the past, in 2014, a massive bombardment and the cutting of mobile and internet links did presage a ground invasion. And that is what we've seen. Not just internet links, also mobile phones. The Red Crescent has said not only can they not reach their people inside the Gaza Strip, but they can't reach each other. So it's not possible to call an ambulance. And probably many people need an ambulance tonight. Now, the healthcare is a particular issue because earlier in the day, the IDF said that the Hamas headquarters was underneath the Al-Shifa hospital. Now, the Al-Shifa hospital is the biggest hospital in Gaza, and that is not only looking after many hundreds of patients, but people are sheltering there because they think it's safer. But the IDF said that that hospital and other hospitals have Hamas installations around them. So tonight, many will be worrying that the IDF, the Israelis, now see the hospitals as, they would put it, legitimate targets. Now, whether Hamas is there or not, that would mean huge bloodshed. That would be an absolute disaster for the people of Gaza. But we can't know whether that's happening or not because the links are cut. Now, there have been signs in the days up till now that this ground invasion was coming because we've seen incursions last night and the night before. We went down to see a reserve brigade earlier in the day, and they are just within a kilometre of the Gaza border. Israel's reservists are ready to go into Gaza the moment they get the order. After hearing about the Hamas attack on October the 7th, Major Schrager Stern jumped on a plane from Chicago in order to fight.
Getting there into every single rocket, finding every single terrorist, detonating every single bomb and booby trap, and getting those terrorist murderers out of their tunnels. That's my main objective, and that will get done.
And the cost to the Israeli army?
Apparently there's a bloody war ahead of us, but as Israelis and as Jewish people, we have no other choice.
But such an escalation would have implications for the whole region. We're about 800 meters from the Gaza border, and this reserve brigade would be one of the ones that would go across if a ground invasion is ordered by the Israeli High Command. But the Americans are very worried about that. Last night's strikes on Iranian bases in Syria show that they're concerned about a wider war and that any ground invasion of Gaza might trigger that. The Pentagon says US forces in northeast Syria and in Iraq, tasked with suppressing the Islamic State, have been attacked by Iranian-backed militia more than a dozen times in the last 3 weeks, and 21 service personnel have been injured. Hence last night's F-16 attacks on Iranian assets. Last Thursday, the USS Carney in the Red Sea intercepted 4 cruise missiles and 15 drones fired towards Israel by the Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen. Yesterday, the Israelis held tank drills near the Lebanese border. They've been exchanging fire daily with Hezbollah, which is also backed by Iran.
I say frankly to the American statesmen who are now managing the genocide in Palestine that we do not welcome to expansion of the war in the region. But I warn, if the genocide in Gaza continues, they will not be spared from this fire.
The more Palestinian civilians are killed and injured in Gaza, the more anger swells across the region.
The people of Gaza are being shattered. 20 people were sleeping in one house. It wasn't expected. There was no advance warning. Among them, 10 were sleeping in one room. I can't believe that my kids came out of this alive. We struggled to pull them out. We are not involved in any fighting.
If Israel is now going in on the ground and the war continues at this pitch, Iran may see an opportunity, and Israel may find that its attempt to destroy Hamas triggers further threats.
Israel has gone to very far extents to preserve lives, not only our own lives, the lives of the Palestinian people as well, giving them notice on leaving.
A lot of people would say that was not true. We're talking about more than 7,000 Palestinians dead so far from the aerial bombardment. Yeah. The majority of them civilians. There are some pretty horrendous scenes coming out of there.
Yeah, I don't know about the numbers that are coming directly from the spokesperson of Hamas.
Of the Ministry of Health.
Of the Ministry of Health controlled by Hamas, but it is war, and in war there are casualties, and you know, there is a term that we use that's called collateral damage.
Collateral damage in Tel Aviv today too. A rocket fired from Gaza got past the Iron Dome air defense system and crashed into an apartment block, injuring 3 people. Evidence that Hamas is still active despite Israel's onslaught. Last night, Israeli forces carried out another incursion into Gaza. Tonight's cutting of the internet, a massive bombardment, shows they have no intention of ceasing fire.
And we'll hear from Lindsay again at the end of the programme. Let's go to Washington and our correspondent, Siobhan Kennedy. Siobhan.
Well, Matt, we've been watching the events going on inside the UN today, where the Arab world has called for a ceasefire. But it does show you really how powerless the UN has become, because as that debate is going on, so we have seen today Israel announce the imminent expansion of its ground operations in Gaza. There has been no immediate reaction from the White House to that announcement. We know that President Biden, it says, was briefed this morning by his national security team on the latest developments. But I can tell you that inside the UN, the United States had already made very clear that it would not back that resolution for the ceasefire, although we do know that it has called for a humanitarian pause. There were strong words inside the chamber today. The Egyptian ambassador talked about double standards from some within the UN, a veiled reference, I think, to the United States, who he believes should be calling for a ceasefire to end what he called the genocide in Gaza. Let's hear a clip from him now.
At a time where so many are turning a blind eye to the truth, silence is no longer an option. Enough is enough. We can no longer bear what is happening to the Palestinians.
The US ambassador to the UN did describe the situation as dire, but she said the US would not back the call for a ceasefire because the resolution lacked 2 critical words, she said, Hamas and hostages. Let's hear what she had to say.
It is outrageous that this resolution fails to name the perpetrators of the October 7th terrorist attack. Hamas. Hamas. Another key word missing in this resolution is hostage. These are omissions of evil, and they give cover to and they empower Hamas's brutality.
Well, the vote on that resolution is due at 8 p.m. UK time, Matt, but the Pentagon says that it is proceeding on the basis that there will be no agreement today on any ceasefire in Israel or Gaza. Matt.
Siobhan, thank you very much indeed. Well, joining me now from Washington, D.C. is Mary Beth Long, who was U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense under President George W. Bush, and from Doha, Nawaf Al-Thani, Qatar's former Director of Defense Intelligence Operations and Defense Attaché in the United States. Thank you very much to both of you for coming on. Let me start with you, Mary Beth. From what you've heard from the IDF this evening, does this sound to you like the beginning of this land invasion incursion?
Well, I think it's eminently foreseeable that in response to Gaza attacking, Hamas attacking the Israelis, that the Israelis would respond. And to the extent there are legitimate military targets in Gaza, and we all know that there are, this is, in fact, foreseeable. And it's a little mystifying to me, and I think the United States response to the UN resolution typifies the frustration on behalf of the United States, that what we don't understand is any recognition or even acknowledgement that it was Hamas that provoked this response from Israel, and Israel is entitled to respond.
But just briefly, you know, from everything we've heard so far, the internet is shut down in Gaza, phone lines are cut. And remarkably, there are no foreign leaders in Israel today. There have been virtually every other day for the last few weeks. Do you think this is the day that so many people have either been waiting for in this country or feared inside Gaza?
Well, certainly Hamas didn't prepare for it. I think you're right. I'm not clear that the internet is down because the towers and the facilities and infrastructure required is down, or whether that was a deliberate reaction by the Israelis. They somehow shut down the internet. But I do think this was foreseeable. And in fact, I think Hamas counted on Israel overreacting or reacting the way that it has so that it can turn around and try to tie the government of Israel's hand publicly.
Okay. Now, Beth, let me turn to you. I mean, Qatar has played a remarkable role in negotiating between Israel and Hamas. You have, you know, Hamas's political leader is based in Doha, where you are. If indeed this is the ground invasion that we've been talking about for so long, does that mean that any release of the hostages, any negotiations about their release, has been put on hold or possibly finished?
Well, it makes it very difficult, definitely. We don't know if it's going to affect it, but we can only imagine, with everything going on the ground, the expansion of the operation or the start of a land invasion would make any negotiation even harder.
But this land invasion might have been put off for a few days or weeks. It was always going to happen there, wasn't it?
That is true, at least from the Israeli rhetoric. But on the other hand, we've seen tangible results from Qatari negotiation. We've seen Israeli citizens being released. We've seen American citizens being released. So this is not a pie in the sky or an imaginary or an unguaranteed approach. We've seen results, and I think the Israeli government should have given this approach more of a chance, and it still can. But unless the Israelis show seriousness in actually releasing the hostages by the cessation of hostilities, I don't know if that could work.
So briefly, to be clear on that front, if the tanks roll in en masse, any negotiations, parallel negotiations about releasing hostages are going to be virtually impossible. Is that what you're saying?
No, we don't know. That's what I'm saying. It's an unknown factor. Once you enter into a ground invasion, it becomes definitely more difficult, but we don't know. And I think the unknowing of the outcome is a very dangerous thing, because unless the negotiators can have a chance to negotiate with someone on the other side, then the negotiations may not succeed. The unknowing is the dangerous part.
Sure. Mary Beth, America is worried about an expansion of this conflict. From the very beginning, after Black Saturday, you know, they were very clear about posting more forces into the eastern Mediterranean. We had these airstrikes overnight against Iranian-backed militiamen. I mean, is there a danger that these preemptive strikes could actually provoke a wider conflict, or is this the thing that prevents that wider conflict?
Well, I think that the conflict, as you point out, is wider, and it's more than that. U.S. forces have been attacked by Iranian proxies repeatedly, actually, this week in Syria. We also are suffering attacks in Iraq. We spoke to Iraqi leadership several days ago, and those attacks are ongoing, so it has spread. The question is, and you appropriately raise it, how far will this expansion go? Right now, the side that is expanding extraterritoriality is the Iranian proxies. I think thus far, everyone else has been in a defensive posture, and I would hope that that would continue to contain what Iran is doing, actually, by attempting actively to spread this to other territories.
Nawaf Al-Thani, you know Hamas well. You've talked to them. You know, as I said before, they're based in Doha, or some of their political leadership is. Israel has said it wants to eliminate Hamas, you know, wipe it from the face of the earth. Is that even possible?
Well, it's unclear what they want to eliminate. Is it the ideology, the groups? And then tactically, how is that even possible when Gaza is under siege and no way in and no way out for help or aid? It seems like it's impossible to differentiate between civilians and combatants in that scenario. And as we've seen as your reporting has proven, over 6,000 killed in Gaza. Whatever policy the Israelis or the IDF is carrying out seems to not be working the way they've projected it to the public.
And very briefly, when the Iranian foreign minister says, as he did today, that more genocide, as he put it, in Gaza will make the statesmen of America pay, you take that seriously?
Well, I think any escalation in the region should be taken seriously. I think if it goes beyond Gaza, then everyone involved, the whole region will be engulfed in a calamity. And I don't think anyone in this part of the world or anyone everywhere else are ready for another forever war as we've had in the past. So I think it's serious, and that's why the Israelis should show equal seriousness in stopping this.
We're going to leave it there. Nawaf Al-Thani, Mary Beth Long, thank you very much to both of you there. Well, back in the UK, Sir Keir Starmer is under growing pressure from senior members of his own party to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. The Labour leadership's official stance is to call for humanitarian pauses to allow aid to get through. But now the mayors of London and Manchester, along with the Scottish Labour leader, say that's not enough to prevent further deaths. Amelia Jen has this report.
With the international community arguing over whether to push for a humanitarian pause or a full ceasefire in Gaza, Sir Keir Starmer's call for the former is exposing fault lines not just with his grassroots. Today, three of Labour's best-known figures away from Westminster broke ranks. The London Mayor Sadiq Khan first.
I joined the international community in calling for a ceasefire. It would stop the killing and would allow vital aid supplies to reach those who need it.
A few hours later, Scotland's Labour leader Anna Sarwar.
And let me be clear, that means a ceasefire right now, and we need a proper peace process. Because sadly, right now, there is no peace and there is no process.
And then Andy Burnham, Mayor of Greater Manchester.
The Mayor, Deputy Mayor and the 10 leaders of Greater Manchester join the growing international calls for a ceasefire by all sides.
Tensions within the party have been growing since this interview with LBC.
A siege is appropriate? Cutting off power, cutting off water?
Well, I think that Israel does have that right. It is an ongoing situation.
Starmer later clarified.
I was saying Israel had the right to self-defence, and when I said that right, it was that right to self-defence. I was not saying that Israel had the right to cut off water, food, fuel or medicines.
Labour's current position reflects that of the government, the US and the EU, all pressing for a temporary pause of Israel's bombing campaign to allow aid in, but allowing for the resumption of military action. For many within the party, though, that doesn't go far enough. Among them, Blackburn councillor Mustafa Desai, who stood down from the party yesterday. Nearly 30 councillors nationwide have resigned over the past weeks.
It's frustrating when you call upon your leadership to make a firm stance on humanitarian grounds, and they don't do that. I think it becomes untenable for people like myself to remain with that party, because it's not what I stand for.
How many people in the party feel like you do?
It's going to be mentally damaging for the party, because there's going to be a whole raft of committed Labour people who have committed to the cause of Labour, resigning, and I can see that going forward.
A Labour spokesperson tonight told us their position came from a recognition that Israel had been subject to a vile terror attack.
Israel has the right and the duty to take action against these terrorists, to stop them causing that to happen again, but they must abide by international law. And right now we all see what's happening on the ground in Gaza. We need that humanitarian pause to get the aid in now when people need it.
This could be Starmer's biggest challenge yet, with internal dissent that's been bubbling up from the grassroots bursting out into the open on this, the most divisive of conflicts.